Hello and welcome to the Christian Therapist Podcast. Lindsey Castleman here and joined with Aron Strong. Hey, Aron.
What's up, Lindsay?
How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's kind of chilly this morning, which is a little nice considering hot is coming. But it's beautiful. Sun's out. It's cool. It's a good day.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad. And today is a day where you and I will be seeing a lot of each other because we have our therapist member group right
That's
after
right.
this today, which I enjoy. It's fun seeing therapists from all over get together and learn. So happy to spend the day with you virtually, really.
It's always fun. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, yes. Well, and Aaron, I know you have not forgotten, but we are in our new series where we're really trying to help uncover what's happening with dot dot dot, and we kind of pick these different presentations, right? We did what's happening with someone that looks like they're the perfect Christian. What's really happening with. And the last episode, we started part one of, man, the person who just comes in and cannot be held accountable. There's just
Yep.
resistance. It feels like on a therapist side, it feels like spinning wheels. Or for me, sometimes it can feel a little like an internal jaw drop, where you just go, whoa, okay. We cannot look inside and own for the life of us, right?
Yep. It makes me think back in grad school when they would talk about client resistance and a client that's like fights you or is not going to do what you say. And I remember back then it was kind of framed like the client's just being a jerk about it, but it's kind of what it sounded like. But that's
Sure.
not always the case, right? Somebody who won't be held accountable, like everything has a function, that thing's there for a reason.
Right.
What's happening with someone who can't be held accountable?
Yes. Well, and last episode broke it down into three different categories, right? So we have the person that can't be held accountable could be a true narcissist. And we put the word true in front of it
Right.
because a lot of times people mislabel people as they're all narcissists.
Anybody who's selfish is a narcissist. Anybody who,
Right, right.
you know, acts in some kind of overly self-confident way that hurt my feelings is a narcissist.
Yes, yes. They don't see me, they're a narcissist. So the true narcissist, but then the second category is they could just be very much in self-preservation,
Right.
right? It is selfish, but it really is more about protecting the self,
Hmm.
preserving the self, because there's a lot happening underneath that they don't know what to contend with or how to contend with it,
Yeah. We
which is
start doing that
same for
about 3 years.
narcissists. Do what?
Well, I said we started doing that about 3 years old and then we never stop. Did you eat that cookie? Nope.
Right,
Yes, you
right,
did. No, I didn't. Like
right, right.
we just preservation of self and
Yes,
relationship. Yeah, yeah.
yes. And to a degree, what you're saying there is a lack of those places maturing
Correct. Right?
inside,
Because that
right?
instinct is still doing the same thing as it did all the way back then.
Yes, yes. And then the third one is it's a different one for everybody to think about, but it is just one who cannot enter in to the accountability place because they just keep collapsing. It's like
Right.
they can't enter into it. The pain of entering into it is so big that they collapse. So their presentation is going to look a little bit different than the first and the second,
That's correct.
but it still is hard to hold them accountable. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into each of the three categories because what we promised was really how do you start to work with them when they're
Hmm.
in your office?
That's
Now,
right.
there can be different reasons that they're in your office. I had one in my office recently that I was telling you about where it was the collapse.
Hmm.
There was the collapse, and so it was hard to own and hard to stay in the pain of ownership.
Yep.
Um, Now, the narcissist, usually would not be in the office. And
Correct.
so it's going to be more helpful for those of you who working with people who are in the relationship with a narcissist to be able to explain what's happening in the narcissist to your client so they can
Yeah.
know how to better relate to that person because it maybe they're in the marriage, maybe it's just a family member, maybe it's a relationship that's like you're bound to them forever
Yep.
in some way.
Yeah.
So Aaron, what words would you say around the first category, just of how to work if you have a narcissist in the room or a true narcissist or someone who's in the relationship you're trying to help them understand the
Yeah.
narcissist?
And I want to clarify too, it's not that narcissists will never show up in your office. It's just not
Sure,
as likely, right? Because
sure.
I've had them.
Right.
And we were able to do some good work with some of them. But that sense of, within narcissism, there's a distrust of others and a high trust of self. In some ways, it's kind of very
Mhm.
avoidant in its
Right.
presentation, but it does it in this very gregarious, overblown way. We talked about it last episode. But there's a sense of accountability threatens their self-value, right? It kind of threatens the very thing that they use to prove their goodness is their performance or how they show up or their perception. So accountability kind of shakes the foundation. So when we're going to hold them accountable, we have to stay on point and you have to do it in a non-threatening way. It's just
Hmm.
almost like a matter of fact thing. When you did that, it did this.
Sure.
And they're like, "Why are you attacking me?" And you're like, "I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying
Hmm.
when you did this, it
Yeah.
affected me this way." And kind of like the more dispassionate you can almost share it, like very matter of factly, because if you come in big, they will be like, "Why are you being so big? Like, why are you crying? Like, oh my gosh, are you serious? You got to make it this big? Is it really seriously? That's how you had to take that?" Because they'll minimize, they'll distract, they'll reflect back to you. You're just being histrionic. Like all of these things that they may do to deflect accountability away,
Hmm.
but you're trying to like remove all the possibilities of accusations. You're just showing up saying, "Hey, this is just what happened." And then you don't let them distract you with other content. Well, I don't know
Right.
why that bothered you. Well, it did. So
Uh-huh.
I want to talk about it with you. Well, why do you need to talk about it now? Well, there's better than never, right? So it's a good time. We're both here.
Sure.
We're talking. And so this is kind of what happened. Well, I was really busy. I was just doing a lot of things. That's fine. I understand you're doing a lot of things, but here's what happened. This is what it did to me.
Hmm.
And so you have to just stay on focus until they get to the point where like you almost get to a point where they'll be like, "Well, what do you want?" I just want you to acknowledge that the thing you did hurt me. That's all.
Right.
That's all I'm looking for is for you to go, "I see that, and that matters." That's all I'm looking for. So
Sure.
you have to make it almost like a small enough to get it through all the defenses. And as a therapist, like maybe in relationships, that's maybe too small to sustain a relationship. But in therapy, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build confidence to enter in accountability in a way that doesn't disparage or doesn't shame. Like we're not trying to shame, we're not trying to push them away. This will come across all three presentations, but the sense of like we're trying to preserve relationship through accountability. Accountability is what preserves the relationship. So with that narcissist, we're really trying to show up in a way that is just resilient, isn't reactive, doesn't buy into the inflammatory things you're going to get. You're just going to be like, this is just kind of like, here's the news. This is what happened.
Yeah.
To get them to make it a bite that they can actually chew on.
Sure. And there is a skill as therapists that we have to start to learn and get better at. And I've had to grow it over the years and even teach it to my supervisees. And it's not an official title. I honestly just call it scooping back. And
Mm,
so there's a place where we go, we're focused in on, maybe what we're focused in on here is just noticing this one thing about the client. Maybe it is the one thing of, like you were saying with the narcissist of holding accountable. And so we know that's going to be hard. And so we start to listen for it's almost like when I've called it like, it feels like it tries to float out this way and then float out
Right.
that way. I've even done the picture of, it can feel like when you're walking on the beach and you've got some kind of like food and all the seagulls are coming to try to take the food away from you. And you're like, no, I've got to preserve this little food right here
Yes.
because this is my focus. Like this is what I'm doing. But you expect, and
Hmm.
in IFS terms, it'll be kind of like all these little parts to try to help exit
Right.
because we know staying in the pain of that is going to be really hard, right?
Yep.
And there's going to be compassion for that because
Hmm.
staying in the pain and looking at what you did can be so, so tough. And I have had clients where a big part of the reason of looking at what they have done to others has been so hard because there have been big wounds in them that no one ever held themselves accountable for that they're
Right.
still carrying. So there's a part inside of them that says, this is not fair. You were wounded, and no one came to look at those wounds or to be held accountable for those wounds. And now you have to be held accountable, even though,
Yep.
yes, you do, because you did injure and you are an adult. Like,
Right.
yes, you do, but there's still that younger, like, painful feeling in there
Yep.
that just says, we can't, we won't. It's hard. But
Yep.
to keep scooping it back, but we're scooping it back not in a way that's condemning. It's not like, okay, so I've been trying to hold you accountable for like 4 times and you've missed it, or whatever. But there is that place of being able to go, like, I know it's hard. Like, I know
Yep.
it's tough. Like, I know there's pain in there that doesn't want you to look
Hmm.
at this because nobody looked at your own pain.
Right.
Like we just start to name what we know is true. And and sometimes there's even a place of speaking to their heart and calling their heart up and out and calling them up and out. But I know that this person matters to you.
Yeah.
I know you want, like, I know your heart isn't for that. Your heart is for whatever, if it feels like that's true.
Now, Lindsay, there's a lot of people are thinking like you're going to say that to the narcissist. I know this person matters to you. I
Uh-huh.
know. Will that get through?
Maybe it will and maybe it won't.
Yeah.
There is a place of knowing um how much of a rapport building there has
Yeah.
been. Do they already know that I am for them,
Yep.
in that way? Um, but yeah, there are those places of going back to like just focusing,
Yeah.
going to focus on that one thing and realizing when you're being carried away,
Yes.
you know?
And I think that that's the thing. It's like, it's very easy to kind of demonize a personality disorder or a kind of a trauma presentation. But you have to know the client you're with. Don't put the client in a diagnosis category.
Right.
You have to see to what spectrum the client has these qualities and struggles in these areas. Because, I one of the narcissists I'd worked in the past, like actual narcissist, he really did love his wife, but all of the
Uh-huh.
other things would get in the way of how that worked out.
Right.
So doing accountability was important because I could say things like you were saying because he could hear it. Now, other ones
Right.
I've had, they're like they're just not going to go there. They're not going to, at
Sure.
least they're not going to admit it in any fashion. But so
Yeah.
you have to know the spectrum that you have. But what's
Right.
beautiful about what you're sharing is that is the whole heart of repair. The
Uh-huh.
purpose of accountability is repair. Accountability without repair is just judgment,
Sure.
right? If accountability that's not designed to restore relationship is just there to condemn, right?
Uh-huh.
It's a courtroom. And as we talk about repair and accountability as a function of repair, though if you're the one who's wounded, that's what you want. Repair is the one who hurts you holds your pain with you.
Uh-huh.
But we have to remember for the one who's doing the activity, like of the repair, right, who injured you, is doing two things. You are just looking for a repair. They are holding their care for you and their own guilt and shame for
Uh-huh.
themselves. They're
Sure.
holding both of these things. And we're trying to ensure that they can hold both at the time. right? The narcissist not going to go to guilt and shame. Maybe there's care, like depends on how much you can leverage of what's going on
Sure.
there. But their resistance is in the guilt and shame side. So what we're doing is we're trying to minimize how much we're trying to get them to feel in that in
Mhm.
order to get it across. And you match it to their capacity as a therapist. There's only so much they can absorb, so you ride the edge of what they can absorb to make sure something gets in there. And then the more they get, the more confidence they have to stay there.
Sure.
We're not just trying to like just barely hold narcissists accountable. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if you get nothing across. If you get something across instead of nothing, that's better. Like it's improvement, right?
Sure. 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 Well, and Aaron, what language would you use, or kind of what examples would you give there just around, when you are trying to, um, hold a narcissist accountable, and you are feeling that resistance from them?
Yeah. And it's difficult because, with the narcissist, as we go, the more vulnerable you can be, like along these different presentations we have. We kind of started from the least vulnerable and we'll get to the most vulnerable and
Right.
kind of in order.
Right.
But that's what I was saying earlier is that sense of kind of like almost reporting the news. This is what happened because they're going to be so defensive about it. I might have to
Uh-huh.
overcome their defensive to get it across.
Sure.
And so that sense of like, I just want you to know this happened. What do you want? I just want you to acknowledge that that's true, that that occurred. Um, you're trying to like I like that idea of scooping as they try to send it out. You're like scooping it back to
Uh-huh.
pull it back to center. And so that's what we're doing. You have to stay anchored in what we're trying to convey, not get distracted, not let your own emotions get overwhelming you, right? Because if they can
Sure.
overwhelm you instead of them being overwhelmed, then that makes them look better. But if you can stay calm and collected and then they start get activated, then you can be calm and curious and be like, I'm just very curious of like right now, it looks like you're getting more upset as we're doing this and kind of what's happening in you that as I
Mhm.
share that this occurred, or as
Right.
your partner has shared that this occurred to them, what is it that makes it so hard to contend with?
Hmm.
Is everything in you set to having such a hard time engaging in this place? Like what's
Right.
happening? Like
Right.
walk me through it. And I'm looking for any sort of disclosure. But what happens is if everybody else is blown up, then no one's looking at them.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yes.
But if we keep everybody else calm, then that gets difficult for them. They start to escalate to try to get people to come with them. But then
Uh-huh.
that's easy to point out. Like, you seem really big right now. Like, you seem
Right.
really loud, or like, what's happening? And
Yeah.
then they have to like do that regulation piece, and you're more likely to get some kind of movement in that regard if you just don't buy into any of the
Yes.
distractions.
Because
Yeah.
I think that's the key there, Aaron, is noticing all the strategies that are going to try to get everybody to exit accountability.
Right.
Like it's not
Yeah.
just them exiting accountability. Like, can they somehow get you to exit the accountability with them? Can they
Yeah.
somehow get um their, whoever's in the room with them, whether it's spouse, whoever, to exit the accountability, maybe by blowing something up, pissing people off, I mean, just like
Yeah. Well,
getting,
an argument is so much safer than accountability.
yes,
We
yes,
can just argue. Let's just do that one. That one's like, I got lots
right,
of skills for arguing, but this whole
right,
accountable, vulnerable thing, I'm out. Like, let's
right,
argue, please. Let's argue.
yes,
That's kind of where it
yes,
will go.
yes. And for the person who is in a relationship with one, that the help that we try to give them is the understanding of this is what they will try to do.
Hmm.
And it's not because they're trying to hurt people. It goes back to it is because they are trying to save themselves.
Correct.
And these
That
are just
attachment frame
strategies.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so important to see the function of a behavior, not just judge something by the behavior.
Uh-huh.
Right. And those things have a very specific function and for them, and we're going to get to this in a second, but it is a lot about self-preservation, but in a very specific way. They do that. And so when we understand that the risk of losing perception, right, because they're all about social perception, because that's the closest to relationship they can get. That's the most vulnerable they can get is how people perceive them. It's very important. Social perception with narcissists is critical. It's a huge part of their schema. Why? It's the closest attachments they can do and how they're seen, but they don't trust to get involved in something deeper.
Right.
You can tell it's relational because it has that frame. So we can leverage that sense of wanting to be seen, wanting to understand who they are, that is an in that allows us to get to something more vulnerable because we can follow that path and we
Right.
integrate accountability into that lens. That there's more capacity that if I can see you, I know you, I can see who you are, and I see why all this is so important to you. But that's why I want you to know that if you accept accountability for an injury you caused with this person right now, that doesn't diminish their view of you, it increases it.
Hmm.
You know that they will see you so much better when you can enter in, that their perception of you will expand, not diminish,
Right.
right? Your thinking that it occurred makes you look worse, not better,
Sure.
right? At
Sure.
least to them, they know
Mhm.
it's real.
Right.
You can try to convince everybody else it's not true, but this thing, and if this is the one that matters to you,
Yeah.
then their view of you will increase, not decrease. So you have to look at lenses that they see things through, and we're leveraging what's available and where the capacity is to help get these messages across to create the security to enter into something more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because it's just very scary. It's just very hard for them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the one who is in the relationship with them, but that true narcissist won't come into the room. There is also that space of helping them understand. And I think what's happening within them, how it is saving themselves, because it can start to feel like I'm crazy, everything's wrong with me.
Right.
If I would get XYZ done, then we would be okay. Because like you were saying, the image, how everybody sees them is so important. So if you start
Yeah.
to move into that, no, you're going to get pushback.
Yeah.
So just helping them understand that and how to not lose their sense of self when that happens, how
Yeah.
not to lose, knowing who they are and whose they are when that survival strategy starts to come their way, and to be able to stand in it, but also to be able to start to add boundaries with it as
Hmm.
well, because even though that is their survival strategy, that is the way they show up and operate, it doesn't mean that in love, going back, that we then become doormats.
Correct. And well, that's kind of the thing. I remember in sales, like there's a point when you make the pitch, like it's this is this much money, and then the first person who talks loses. Like that was like a sales strategy. And with narcissists, it's kind of like whoever doubts themselves first loses. Right? Because then if you offer a doubt, then they're going to prey on the doubt, and then you're like, how do you know? Like you're not even sure yourself, and right?
Right.
Because whoever doubts first loses. So the best defense against the accusations of others is knowing yourself. You
Yes.
know, well, do you even know that it hurt you? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've hurt. It did, but it doesn't even matter. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what I know is that when you did that, it hurt. That's what happened. That's then you
Right.
can stay confident in the areas of your confidence, and not let the distractions exacerbate the doubts that you already carry about yourself because they have them. They just not going to show them to you, or
Right.
they won't even look at them in themselves. They won't even go there
Right.
within.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that sense of like leverage what's available, stay core to what your injury is.
Mhm.
Remember the goal of accountability is repair. So if
Yeah.
you're just going to try to go make them feel bad, that will not happen. They just won't do it,
Right.
right? But they may be motivated to something more persistent in terms of relationship rather than something as tenuous as perception if it feels solid and trustworthy.
Right. Right. Well, and now let's go ahead and let's hop to the second category. It's one of those where I sit back and I go, man, should we have done each podcast episode just on each
Each
presentation,
one. Yeah, I know.
and probably we could have
Yeah.
this. But the second one that we were talking about is more of those, they're not true narcissists, but it's more self-preservation. And
Correct.
out of self-preservation, it's hard to hold themselves accountable or look outside of themselves to really be able to, well, it's maybe it's not hard for them to look outside themselves as I'm sitting and thinking about it. There just is a place of contending with all of those fears, usually that self-preservation people are contending with on the inside.
Yep.
It can be hard because looking out to see what they did and who they hurt and how they hurt can start to confirm those fears,
hmm
which
What
is
does that look
really
like for you,
painful.
Lindsay, in your office? Someone, because that can be like the self-preservation. We're talking about it as a concept, but there may be folks that are like, well, kind of like, what are we talking about? Like, what's this look like in the
Sure,
room?
sure. There, a lot of times in the room, what you'll see first is you will see a place of defensiveness. There is going to be man, and really the defensiveness as I'm sitting with it, the defensiveness a lot of times can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm condemned for the one thing I do wrong, and I
Yep.
do a million things right. Like, will I ever be seen? Well, like, will I always be labeled for the one thing that I do wrong? Or was that all that will be seen? Because there is like that's kind of the voice, when you start to drill it down, when you start to get the meaning. The meaning is just like, I'll never get it right. Like it'll always be seen this way. I'll always be seen that way. They're always harp on this. They will nag me all the
Yep.
time. Or man, it can even be like they're just so controlling. Um, and there can be a lot of times for me as a clinician where I sit back and it's kind of this picture I think we've painted before in previous podcasts that reminds me of even being a parent, where with I learned very quickly with my kiddo that when he comes to me in pain, I do have to sit with the pain, but I also have to ask the question, um, and then what did you do right before that?
Right.
Like, yes, like you feel really left out, you feel really in pain, and help me know what happened right before that. I think I've said it on this, the one where he's like,
hmm
he told me to get off the trampoline, and I'm like, why did he tell you to get off the trampoline? Like, I'm like, oh, that's so hard-headed. Da, da, da. And then I'm like, hey, bud, help me. Help me know how come he would want you off the trampoline. And he's like, oh, well, I picked up his cell phone and I threw it out of the trampoline against the wall. And I'm like, mm-hmm.
Huh. Hmm.
So there it is. Like, oh, there it is. Um, but that's the harder place to look at
Yeah.
too, is
Yep.
to go, man, all of this is happening to me
Yep.
versus I also played a part in it, because looking at that part that I played can be a very scary place to look at, because it will start to confirm these fears that I'm already contending with myself about.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing about the self-preservation frame. There's a lot of different ways it shows up as you're describing, but fear is much closer to the surface, right? The
Mhm.
risk of vulnerability is much more present, which is why it has to be so vigorously defended.
Right.
Uh, with the narcissist, they're not even going near, it's not near the surface.
Right.
They've shoved it so far down. You're trying to work your way to it. With the preservation, that fear is right there because there's a sense of when you do something wrong, feeling guilt and shame is an appropriate response.
Correct.
No one's supposed to not feel guilt and shame when you do something wrong. Like
Right.
that, then nobody would do anything different. We'd all do things that were wrong and not even care about it. But our guilt helps us know that we're acting out of our character. Guilt
Mhm.
says, hey, this isn't what we do. And then shame is recognizing that I'm someone who can do something wrong because I did.
Right.
And there's aspects to these things that are true, but we make them global about our identity versus something that happened in a moment. And then it becomes this
Mhm.
overshadowing. And then our fear is that if I admit that I have guilt and shame, then someone will agree with me and that's all I'll be.
Sure.
So we vigorously defend this vulnerability of guilt and shame that we have in our mistakes, and we do all these things to try to like push it away. But it is not about condemnation of the other, or just
Right.
condemning the injured. It's about preserving that sense of self of will I even be accepted? Will I even be seen if I confess? Will it be safe? Will I go to jail? Will I lose everything if I admit it? If I don't admit it, maybe I can like people are like, well, maybe he didn't. And I can convince them that maybe I don't have to be grounded or I don't have to sleep on the couch or, I don't have to have a consequence. Maybe I can just get away from not having to have a consequence. That'd be great.
Sure.
But the risk of being seen and then having a consequence for my worst fear is very, very difficult.
Mhm.
So there's very specific ways we kind of work with that in helping that, and it has everything to do about reassuring the relationship first, and then going towards the accountability. And that's what kind of what I heard you mention with your son, right? You reassure him first,
Uh-huh.
and then you start questioning about what
Right.
happened,
What really
right?
happened here? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's slow that
Um,
down. Because what
so
you're
that's kind of what we're
saying
doing.
there, Aaron, right? It's like the fear, even though they might not be showing it outwardly, like the fear floods,
Yes.
right? Like there is kind of a flood, and that fear does start to whisper those things. It's like, here's the one more thing. Maybe this is the thing that breaks, what is it, the straw that breaks the
Mhm.
camel's back? Like, again, like they see this in me again, 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 right?
Yep.
Um, and so maybe this is going to be the time that they say, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And
And
they're,
you can kind of measure the fear, like the intensity of the fear of the one who's refusing accountability by how loud their defenses are,
yes,
right? Because they're defending too big. Why are
right.
we so like they're coming in like this huge hot way and you're like, what in the world? Right? Like
Yes,
this
yes.
not that big. We're just doing this thing, right? And so, but
Uh-huh.
they're like immediately, oh, really demonstrative, like, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. It's not what I think. You're like, whoa, hey, like that's a
Right,
lot,
right,
right? Because there's
right.
a lot going on behind the defensiveness.
Uh-huh.
And you can't just call that out and condemn the fear because that
Right.
just increases fear. You have to soothe the fear without getting off topic or knowing that we're going to come back to it. If I reassure the relationship, right? It's okay. Hey, we're not against you, not trying to condemn you. Like, can we just slow down a second? This seems really big. What's happening? Why is it? Well, because here's all my fear. I understand that's just really scary. That's very hard, right? Here's you're attuning to the one who's defending, right? That's just very difficult in
Hmm.
these moments. So when they say this hurt them, what happens in you? Kind of what happens around all of this defensiveness?
Right,
Well, it's just not true. It's not true that they felt hurt.
right.
Well, I guess that's true, but it's not true why they're saying I did it. Does it matter why you did it if they were hurt anyway? I mean, does their hurt matter to you in any fashion? Well, yeah. Okay, well then there's some room for accountability then, because even
Mhm.
if you didn't mean to hurt them and they were hurt, does it matter to you? Well, yes. Well, okay, well, can we do that part? And then we can start seeing what's happening, what's going on.
Right.
And so we have to lean into that fear and that resistance, not from a condemning frame, but from an attunement frame, because that security of all the fear reduces intensity and it makes those walls less rigid, a little more permeable. And so we can kind of get things through them, right?
Hmm.
And then we can kind of move into if it's a couple at enactment or with you and the client, or just like with somebody who's not in the room, like what's happening in there, what would you want them to know? And then you can kind of role play stuff out.
Yeah. Well, and because what I'm hearing in there, Aaron, is like when that fear does flood in them, you almost think about it as though like that's the glasses that they're putting on. Like they're seeing everything. That's the hearing aid they put in. Like they're
Yep.
seeing and hearing everything that the other is saying to them through that voice,
Right.
and that voice into them feels condemning,
Right.
even though, and this is what I'll say to couples all the time, is um like as we take it slow, I'm wondering that you can notice, or, will that fear allow you to notice that they're actually trying to invite you in, not indict you? Like it's inviting,
Right.
not indicting.
Right.
And
If that's true.
if that's
If that's
true,
true.
for sure. Or even start to help, help the client in slowing down to go, hey, help me. Help me. What did you hear them say
Right.
in this moment? Again, knowing that we're hearing and seeing it from a skewed lens, but to have them practice check back in.
Yeah.
Like, this is what my fear is telling me that you're saying, and
Right.
even to be able to parse that out, to go
Yep.
like, I'm hearing it through, I can tell it's present, I'm hearing it through that lens. Let me check in to see if it's telling me what's true,
Yeah.
you know?
And this was something that makes this one different from working with the narcissist, where in the narcissist, we're staying on topic, we're not buying into reaction, but we're kind of
Yes,
relentless to this is what happened. In this space, from an ASR lens, we always attune to the most distressed feeling. And if there's a defensiveness that's so big that can't accept accountability, then I'm going to attune to the defensiveness and say, help me understand defensiveness,
right.
which looks like it's a distraction from accountability, but I'm addressing the barrier to accountability,
Mhm.
right? Tell me about this wall that
Right.
nothing gets through. And then I'm still focused on the goal, but I've got to address this barrier first to create some pathways where things can flow. And that's kind of what you're describing in terms of like we are recognizing that there's something that shows up that
Mhm.
hijacks this process.
Right.
But if we can link people back to their heart, to the care that exists within them, if we can elicit compassion, then that helps us press into more vulnerable, scary places. Because if because someone's worth some effort, if there's not this sense of, I always joked like, if you're a turtle and the other person's beating your shell with a stick, saying stick your head out, what I mean? Like that's a whack on the head on its way. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
like cut my head off. But if we can like, hey, it's okay, come on out, and then they can come
Mhm.
out, we can be like, look, here's the bad stuff that's going on around your shell. And
Right.
they can be like, they can see it and respond to
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yes. You got it. Well, and now let's move on, Aaron, to the third one. The third one has more about those who they just cannot stay in accountability
Yeah.
because there literally has been a collapse of self.
Hmm.
A little bit of, I was just saying, experience that um, in my office recently. And there is such a place of almost like watching the collapse come over or the shame come over almost like an ocean wave, like a tidal. And you
Yep.
could just like, man, it just swept that person's sense of self.
Hmm.
And even the place of just the foundation in knowing who you are, like who you are just in Jesus. You could
Right.
see just like it was like non-existent, which
Yeah.
honestly, and this is a side, but the more that we can feel like deeply loved as flawed humans and just allow that experience and that truth to sit with us, the more we build that sense of self that doesn't get tossed away and tossed to and fro by accountability.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like I kind of think of it as like it's an anchored in. And when we're anchored in and we know we're anchored in with the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, like it's kind of like a whole anchoring party there
Yep.
that can help hold us up and we can stand and withhold any storm that comes our way.
Hmm.
And the storm can feel like condemnation, accusation, this
Yep.
accountability, but really and
Mhm.
truly, it's accountability is a place of love that's helping us see parts of ourselves that we need to contend with, that we need to
Hmm.
grow, that aren't mature yet, that we
Right.
probably need the Trinity to move into. Right.
And whether we are the therapist or it's someone in our relationship, like these verses aren't next to each other in the Bible, but there's a verse that says, we love others because he first loved us.
Uh-huh.
And he who has been forgiven much forgives much,
Right.
right? And when we look at that sense of like, when I recognize the degree to which I am loved despite my failures and
Right.
flaws, not the love because, but a love despite, then that security isn't shaken because of something I did wrong. He just says, if you confess your sin, I'll forgive your sin. Just come back to me and confess, like come back and
Uh-huh.
repair.
Uh-huh.
I'll hold you accountable, but not to condemn
Right.
you because it restores relationship. That's the model we're kind of like looking at. And
Uh-huh.
so with someone who collapses, and we have to check and make sure and see if there's trauma back there because trauma is the experience of the collapse of the self in a way that we could not run, we could not fight, something bad is happening, and
Right.
I couldn't escape it. And what we also know in addition to that, it's how that affects you is impacted by who's with you before,
Sure.
during, and after that experience.
Right.
So even if there's trauma in the back, the fear of the feeling of the collapse of self can feel traumatic in the moment because that's kind of the core of what that's like. And so in those moments, if we're trying to hold someone accountable and then they collapse in pain and shame, those are moments when we have to go attend to the self, not stick to the accountability. It's kind of the opposite of what we're doing with the narcissist. On the other end of the spectrum, we have to go rescue the self, pull
Uh-huh.
it back, affirm it, confirm it, like I'm with you, you matter, right? That's not good, but you're still safe here. We're with you. And the more you get the self back online, then we can be curious what happens when you hear this or you recognize you did it wrong or you hear the pain that you caused, what's happening inside of you. I'm just such a terrible person.
Mm.
Who does that? Well, the answer is everyone does that to some degree because all have sinned and fallen short. No one's
Right.
righteous. No one gets it all perfect. We make different mistakes, but we all make the mistakes because we choose ourselves. So
Right.
in this space, we are assuring them that their vulnerable self is safe to be present. And then what's restorative is knowing that if you can hold their pain, it's recognizing their care for you flows back to you when they know you can hold their pain,
Mhm.
right? You caused an injury, you hold the pain, and you get a kind of a grace in return. You get when we do it right, right? It
Sure.
gets impaired when the other person is so injured they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to receive accountability, they just want
Yeah.
condemnation because I want you to
Right.
know it's bad, but I'm not going to let you in. It's a different thing. But in this case, we're trying to really slow it down, sustain the self to be present in pain because that's probably why they collapsed in the first place. No one was with them in the pain. And so we are holding them present in pain securely. And then as they do that, then we can begin to bring in the pain of another and integrate that into that sense of connection. And
Mm.
that expands their window of tolerance. They're able to absorb
Right.
more. And then we can teach them what repair really looks like. That's not just condemnation, but actually is restorative, which is probably something they didn't get in the first place, which is why they collapsed.
Correct. 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 Because there is, what do they say? Like some of the best self-regulators had great co-regulators growing
Absolutely,
up.
that's right.
And
That's
so
right.
this is what it can start to tell us is when we collapse, when we cannot self-regulate in these moments, when, you know, uh, it's pretty obvious we did do something that caused pain.
Yep. Yep.
It can point very clearly to there was a lack of good co-regulators in their life that didn't show them the way. And I would even add the co-regular, or the ones who were supposed to be co-regulators probably could have been the ones that actually did more injuring. And
Yep.
so those are just good things for us to know, especially if we're working with them individually as well, to start
Hmm.
to go, man, there are probably some younger, um, younger parts of them, younger places inside of them, younger wounds in them that we do have to help with. Again, moving at the edge in which they are able to move.
Yeah.
Um, but even as I say that, there can show up a type of sadness again
Hmm.
for those younger selves of these people. They're just
For
like,
sure.
man, to some degree, you were just figuring it out alone.
Right. If you had bad models, uh, then everything you have is bad.
Right.
uh, in this arena. If
Sure.
you had no models, I had a client recently whose family was connected but never addressed injuries ever, never pushed into discomfort or challenge.
Right.
And so there's just no models how to do it. You mentioned kind of earlier in the podcast that's kind of like a part of them that protected like when they were three never changed because there was never another model presented. So it's still just quick defense, brush it under the rug, let's get back to connection and secure the
Right.
connection and move
Right.
on. That can happen too. So there's a spectrum in that regard, but the solution is always the same. We
Yeah.
want to affirm the relationship because that builds resiliency to lean into pain that we've caused because the other person matters to us. We get
Sure.
obsessed with our own preservation and we stop paying attention to wanting to assist the preservation of the other, which
Hmm.
is why scripture says that we have to consider others' needs as more
Hmm.
important than our own and be willing to bear a price for the
Right.
sake of another, which is exactly what Jesus did, who
Yes.
bore a price for us. He didn't even do anything wrong. We're actually guilty. So how much more should we bear the price that we've caused for the sake of people we care about? And so
Right.
with the three different presentations, there's different ways we fail at that. But the wise therapist is able to distinguish kind of what's happening in each presentation. And we're
Hmm.
trying to provide tools that help us be equipped to navigate that process, that healing, transformative process with clients in our work.
Well said, Aaron. I like it. It's a good wrap up, and it's perfect timing because we have to hop over to our member group.
That's right.
That works out well. Thank you for the conversation, Aaron, and we will keep on keeping on in this topic. I think it's a not, I don't know if fun is the right word, but it is an intriguing
Yeah.
series of just like, man, what's happening with these different
Yep.
presentations?
Yep.
So this wraps up the one on accountability, or the one that's hard to hold accountable or doesn't want to be held accountable. And then, man, I'm also like, Aaron, we probably should say, hey, if anybody wants to join us for the member group, go to
Yeah.
relationship.us and we have them. And if we don't have a member group going when you're listening to this, because I never know when people might listen to the podcast, we do have a lot of online courses that
Mhm.
we've created out of our member group
Yep.
talks.
Other trainings. Hmm.
And so just
And
going to inrelationship.us is a great resource.
and then if there's therapists that are listening that are like, what is happening with this presentation that we haven't talked about?
Oh,
Drop
yeah.
us a line. Like, let
Yeah.
us know kind of what you're looking for, and we'd love to explore it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Aaron, and I'll see you again.